Welcome to episode 7 of the Composer Happy Hour, presented by Whatever and Ever Amen. If you're a first-time listener, I'm so glad you found us and gave us a listen. I hope you enjoy the show. I know there are a few of you listening right now who are real followers of the show. Fans, even. And if you fall into that category, I want to ask you for a favor. Before you start the episode, share a link to the show on your preferred social media platform and let people know what you like about it. It means a lot to me, and your recommendations will carry some weight with your friends. I appreciate you helping us to get the word out, so thank you. I also want to once again remind everyone that the show is available in video format at www.buymeacoffee.com/whateverchoir. And if you feel so inclined, you can also support the show by buying us a beer on that site. And please rate and review us on whatever platform you are listening to. Our guest today is Jennifer Jolley. Jen is awesome. I've been a major fan of her work since I first heard it, and I am equally a fan of her as a person. Today we talk baseball, bourbon, and why fuck is such a great word for choral music. If you haven't already, pour yourself a drink. My name is Brad Pearson, my guest is Jennifer Jolley, and this is the Composer Happy Hour. Jennifer Jolley, welcome to the Composer Happy Hour. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Brad?
I am super great. I'm excited to be here talking with you, excited to have a drink, and, great.
Sounds great.
Tell us what you're drinking tonight.
So I'm pretty basic tonight. I am drinking a gin and tonic because I live in Texas and it is balls hot out here. Admittedly, I'm actually going a little non-alcoholic today just because my stomach's a little queasy, so I'm doing that Drink Monday stuff, which is really good.
Yeah.
I would say that if I were going the alcoholic route, I would do a bourbon that I just tried. There is this distillery in Austin, Texas, and I went to my local liquor store, and they're called Still Austin, and they have this bourbon called The Musician, which has a little bit of a kick to it. So I'd probably be having that. Also, my spouse did drink the rest of it right before this podcast.
Perfect.
I was like, thanks, babe. Thanks for doing it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm basic in that I'm doing beer again, which people that have been listening, I've just had beer pretty much every episode. But this is Founders Imperial Stout, which is a Russian Imperial Stout, which was on purpose for our conversation. And so it's a 10.5%. It's a little bit boozy, kind of chocolatey and wonderful. So,
that sounds delicious.
Yeah. In fact, I looked... I knew that I had some Russian Imperial Stouts in the cellar, but I had to look it up and make sure because that was the inspiration for the conversation, and people will figure that out later. So, cheers.
Cheers, friend.
You mentioned Texas. You're relatively new to Texas. How long have you been there now? 3 or 4 years?
I would say I'm wrapping up my 3rd year. So I moved to Texas in August of 2018 because I got hired by Texas Tech University. So I'm an assistant professor of composition there. Bless my spouse who kind of packed me up while I was teaching at Interlochen. In the middle of teaching at Interlochen in Michigan, I had to fly down to Lubbock, find a place to live, and then basically I drove from Interlochen to my apartment in Ohio, and then the next day we took off on the road to move. So, that was my trip, and I've been here about 3 years, going on 4.
And how are you finding Texas? I ask that and give as nuanced an answer as you want, because obviously you are employed there and have surely made wonderful friends and communities there. But Texas is kind of its own thing.
Well, as I tell my New Yorker friends, I have to remind them and myself that Texas used to be its own country, and I think it explains all the things. Jokingly, I say that Lubbock is very flat, which it is. When I first visited Lubbock, which was actually not during my interview here, I had a piece world premiered at Lubbock, Texas. There was a conducting DMA student who, friends from undergrad, and he did a world premiere of a piece of mine. So I flew out to Lubbock, and I remember he had on his computer a bumper sticker that said "Keep Lubbock Flat." It was kind
Mm.
of like a trade of like "Keep Austin Weird" or something
Yeah,
like
right.
that. So it is so flat here that I think I can see the curvature of the earth. It is just plains, like the sky
Uh-huh.
is enormous and beautiful. But I will say that it's flat, and it is the most Texas place in the state of Texas. So every single stereotype you think of
Uh-huh.
Texas, you're actually thinking about Lubbock, Texas.
All right.
There you have it.
All right. Uh, hey, I wanted to ask you, you're a sports fan,
I
as I
am.
recall, and I know you're a Dodgers fan.
I am a Dodgers fan.
And the Dodgers are a half game behind the Giants right now, but they have won 9 out of their last 10.
They
You
have.
must
They
be
did.
feeling good about that.
I am feeling good about it. I like to tell myself that this is before the All Star break.
Yeah.
I still think we have a solid team. Personally, I did not think the Giants would be our competitors this year. I
Mm-hmm.
thought it was more the Padres, and we have not been doing well against the Padres. But I'm feeling good. I know that we lost to the Marlins last night,
Mm.
and they're playing them as we speak. I'm just very excited that we finally won a World Series last year.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it was a weird year for the whole world, but I will take the win.
Uh-huh.
And I did buy some swag, so I'm
Nice.
excited that we're the World Series champions. And they recently went to the White House, and relief pitcher Joe Kelly recently um, traded one of his jerseys for a mariachi jacket. As a side note, Joe Kelly's mom is Mexican, of like Mexican descent, and he wore that mariachi jacket to the White House with the hashtag
Nice.
Joe meets Joe. So there you
Nice.
go.
Well, I on the opposite end of the spectrum, I'm a Cubs fan who have lost
Oh
10 in a
God,
row.
I'm so sorry. No,
And I
I
think
yeah.
actually the Dodgers should probably credit the Cubs for their more recent success, because the Cubs did a little West Coast swing and they beat up on the Padres and they beat up on the Dodgers, and the Cubs were looking great. And kind of since then, we've gone in opposite directions.
Yeah.
So
I might
not
have to
great.
ask, now that Jock Peterson is playing for your team, how's he doing?
I have a 1 year old, so I don't watch a lot of baseball.
You do,
I
he's adorable.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't. I mean, I see so few games, and of course, the way that Major League Baseball is that unless you're paying for this, a Major League Baseball package, I just don't get very many Cubs games. I get a lot of Indians games and a lot
Hmm.
of Tigers games,
Hmm.
but so I don't see a lot of games. So I can tell you box scores, but that doesn't necessarily give a good indication of how you feel about somebody on your
That
team.
that's true. I feel like with baseball, it's not just about the stats, even though there are stats for everything.
Mm-hmm.
But there's definitely that feel, that emotion you have with the player. That being said, when we stop recording, I can hook you up with a password and username if you so choose.
Well, all right.
All right.
Uh-huh. Now, sports. Are you a fan of any other sports? Is it baseball, and that's the thing?
So it's primarily baseball. My New Year's resolution this year was to actually understand soccer.
Uh huh.
And couple of reasons. I've watched the TV series Ted Lasso 4 times, or maybe 5. I don't know. Like, I made my parents watch it when I
So
finally got to
good.
visit them. It's so good. And I keep quoting like, no, seriously, what is offsides? Explain to me
Right.
offsides. I theoretically understand it, although I did have a colleague who's like, do I need to get a salt and pepper shaker out? I'm like, dude, I get it. I just need like a first down line that's digital of
Right.
offsides. Like, I just need to see this chart. So I love Ted Lasso. A couple of years ago, when the World Cup was on, I noticed a group of people were watching the game at one of the Interlochen dorm rooms. Turns out all these Shakespearean actors were soccer fans. And so it was rather entertaining how they were talking about the game. And furthermore, they were also judging the soccer players' acting skills, which I thought was very
Huh.
appropriate. So, like, they're like, oh man, you're not really in pain. Like, try to act this one up if you're going to like add more stoppage time. So I learned a little bit from that. And my spouse also follows Serie A. So
Hmm.
I've decided to follow a Korean player who plays for the Premier League, Tottenham, and I'm trying to understand it. But
Hmm.
it's a goal. I haven't given it up yet, and it's July, so
Yeah.
we're gonna see how that
Well,
goes.
soccer. I always get really excited about the men's and women's national team. So if it's
Yes.
World Cup or the Olympics, like I get really excited for that. That's always a lot of fun. But I went to my first MLS game. Now I lived in Seattle for a few years, and I should have gone to a Sounders game, and just it was grad school, and it didn't
Oh,
happen,
I
right?
feel you. Yep.
But we were in Portland 2 summers ago, and we went and saw the Portland Timbers play the Vancouver Whitecaps, and the atmosphere was incredible.
That's so
I mean,
cool.
it was one of the most fun sporting events I've been to, and I think soccer and hockey are both sports that like you have to go to a game to kind of get it,
Yeah,
and then
a
once you've
hundred
been,
percent.
it's easy to get hooked.
I will have to say to you and whoever else is listening that I didn't understand baseball as a child. I very much listened to Vin Scully's voice because he called the Dodger games for multiple generations. Like, I think so many people can say they grew up with Vin Scully calling the games.
Yeah.
So I'd hear him call the games. I have no idea what's going on, I have no visuals. And then I'd see it on TV and I'm like, wasn't quite understanding. But I remember I was 16 years old. It was some kind of church trip. We saw a freeway series with the Dodgers and the Angels, and it changed my life. I'm like, this is
Mm.
amazing. So I had 100% agree. I can't wait to go to a live soccer game. And hopefully I can go to a live hockey game. Hockey's also on my list of trying to
Yeah,
understand.
for sure. Hockey and soccer have a lot of similarities.
Like
Offsides is,
offsides? Yeah,
well,
okay.
kind of. Yeah. I wanted to ask you about this. I don't know if you'll have an answer if you've been paying attention to this, but have you heard about the big controversy happening with at ESPN over the last 48 hours? So there's
No.
a reporter, African American female reporter named Maria Taylor,
Okay.
who has been kind of, I would say, is rising higher up and higher up and higher up at ESPN. And there's another white female reporter named Rachel Nichols, who
Mm-hmm.
you may have seen. She does a whole bunch of NBA coverage, has been around for a long time. Well, recording leaked the other day of Rachel Nichols basically saying that if Maria Taylor started getting, I don't know exactly what it was. I think if she started covering the NBA finals instead of Rachel Nichols, it would be because ESPN wanted to play the diversity higher or something like that. And it was real like
Ugh, come
not
on.
good at all.
No.
And anyway, so it's been a big hullabaloo, if you will.
I will look this up later. Also, oh man.
It
Don't
wasn't
say these things when you could be recorded or
well,
ever.
and the thing that
or ever.
yeah, or ever. The thing about it was that like it was strange because 30 years ago, 20 years, whatever it was that Rachel Nichols started at ESPN, there were probably a lot of men saying the exact same thing about her.
100%.
And I
Yep.
just don't understand how I just don't understand how you go that route when you basically were in the exact same spot, right? Trying to kind of claw your way up in this company. And
I mean, yes. Also, there have been instances of it where sometimes I joke where I go like, there are some people out there that just want to become the white men in power.
yeah,
Um, you're absolutely right though, because every time I hear about this, I'm like, dude, didn't you just claw your way up? Didn't you weren't you just in a position that sucked? And
Yeah.
didn't you want to make it better for future generations?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that all the time. So you're not wrong. What a mess. That sucks. And that's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, that shows you again how little actual sports that I'm watching these days, because I'm just getting like what's on mainstream news, right? Like
Hey,
if
you
it's
knew
on the,
about that. I don't have a child to like say I can't keep up. I mean, and cats are really not the same thing. So,
yeah. Hey,
uh,
by the way, yeah, are you fostering cats right now? Is that
I
what I remember, or did I imagine that?
no, you were not imagining that for the last 3 months. Let's just say that one of the pandemic projects was to feed stray cats in our backyard because they're so cute and adorable. And, if you could believe it, it actually does get cold in Texas. And
Sure.
if you could also believe it, sometimes the whole power grid goes out when you live in Texas. So we fed the
Mhm.
cats,
Mhm.
and one of them was like, the cute neighbor kid who came in and like took out all the toys and ate all the food, kind of like a little mini Urkel, but this was a cat Sam, and we called her Sam Sam. She would just like
Uh-huh.
run around and play. Um, then eventually Sam Sam got knocked up and decided that my spouse's closet seemed like an awesome place to have her kittens.
Uh-huh.
So
Okay.
that was crazy. So we fostered her and her litter of kittens. She's not the best mom. I joked and said that she had an extended spring break and she made certain life decisions.
Yeah.
And now she's gonna stay here to feed her children. And she would scruff them in the front. So we're like, Sam, don't choke hold your children. That's a bad idea.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the kittens got old enough, and I finally found homes for them, and they are gone. And now Julius and Calpurnia have their house back, kind of. And so we still have Sam Sam. If anybody wants her, you can have. She's great. We just
Yeah.
like I thought my kitty ovaries are tubes are tied. Like that was just a
Yeah.
lot of cats in the same place. It was a little overwhelming. It was adorable. It got us through the end of the semester, I think, when I post kitten videos, but we're getting back to normal here. So yes, that's my long story of what has happened during quarantine slash
Uh-huh.
COVID.
Mm. Cats terrify me because I
Ah,
think they are smarter than I am and would murder me if they could.
I mean, I don't think they are. Um, but some of them are assholes. So
Mm.
I get it. Totally
Mm.
fine. Hmm.
I
Yeah.
mean, I kind of like cats individually for small periods of time. Like if I know that they're like we're kind of they trust me and I trust like small, but then like that cat that I was like petting and I thought trusted me, like I fall asleep on the couch and it's suddenly sitting on my face, and we no longer have that trust. You know what I mean?
Space issues. Like there's
Yeah,
a lack of consent,
yeah.
I sense. Like that's not
Uh,
nice.
I mean, I've never owned a cat, so I think it's mostly just a foreign thing to me.
Did you actually have a cat sit on your face though?
I don't think quite that, but they're. I mean, they're kind of they invade your space like stealthily. I mean, like
True.
dogs are just like in your face, and it's you kind of see it coming, and just like
Exactly.
cats are.
That's,
Where'd you come from?
absolutely fair. One of the kittens, she was so cute, but like I think she wanted to attack me. Like the kill switch like clicked on, and so I go and it's like, "There's Martha," and she jumps out. I'm like, "That's adorable." I'm glad you're not going to end up as big as me. That would be
Yeah,
terrifying.
right.
You just
See,
want to
it's
destroy.
size. Size is the only thing preventing them from being just murderous, right?
No, so I just scoop her up. I'm like, she's so adorable, and she's like, put me down, and I'm like, yeah, yeah. I,
Uh,
I I felt like I needed to tell her who was boss, but every time she was just like pounce, and I'm like, oh.
uh-huh.
So yeah, you're not wrong at all.
All right, good. You grew up in Los Angeles, is that right, or near Los Angeles?
Yes.
So tell us when and where you were born.
Okay, so I was born in January 1981 in Los Angeles County in a city called Bellflower. And Bellflower is really close to the city Downey, and if I were to not exactly age myself, but I think older people would know that Downey, California is where the Carpenters are most famously from.
Mhm.
So that's in LA County, close to the 5 freeway. And I would say, okay, I would say probably about maybe an hour away from Disneyland if we're gonna do the whole freeway, like
Yeah,
figuring
yeah.
out Southern California type of thing. And so that's where I grew up. When I was in high school, my family moved to another place in Los Angeles County called Cerritos, but then I ended up going to a high school in Orange County called the Los Al High School of the Arts, or OSHA. It is now the Orange County School of the Arts, still pronounced OSHA. So
Sure.
um, that's kind of my background there. Speaking of Disneyland, yes, I did. One year I was like, Mom, Dad, can I have a combined birthday present slash Christmas present, because I'm born like 2 weeks after Christmas. So, there have been times my mom would say, like, so what did you really want for Christmas? I'm like, Mom, that's not
Yeah.
nice. But okay, yeah. How about I have a Disneyland pass? So,
Hmm.
I'd say probably a very typical Southern California childhood. Definitely gone to the beach a few times, definitely got really sunburned from the beach growing up. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's generally where I'm from. And my
It's
parents have since moved to Orange County. So,
it is so funny. Uh, it is without fail, people from California are they always give their location in proximity to roads and other things, and it's so funny. And the skit on SNL, the Californians,
oh
is
God.
so spot on in that one way, right? I mean, it's
Oh yeah, it
ludicrous,
is.
but
No,
it's
you're
so
right.
funny.
No, as soon as that episode dropped, like I had friends who were like, dude, that's totally you. I'm like, no, but okay, you're not
Yeah,
wrong how
sure.
we refer to freeways. I think a lot of it is just because the place is so big.
Hmm.
It's one of the bigger states in the union, and also it's highly populated. So what we'd know as like towns and cities, we literally have like cities after cities like right next to each
Yeah.
other. In so much that the last time I was there with my spouse, he was asking me if each city had their own mayor. I'm like, yeah, because they're all cities. But just to be like, okay, we're in Hawaii Gardens now. Oh, we're in Anaheim now. Just driving through.
Yeah.
I think it's helpful to have some kind of like location, and also the freeways kind of help. Granted, I realize that you're probably not familiar with the California freeway
Yeah.
system, but that's just kind of how I do it. And when I started driving, I kind of memorized like freeway, like merging exits and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So once upon a time when I was in high school, I actually did work at Dodger Stadium.
Oh.
And yeah, so I remember I'd have to take the let's see if I remember. It was like this insane, like you had to merge 4 highways over. Yes. So I think I would take from Cesar Chavez Parkway, I think, get on the 110, merge on to, no, get on the 5, merge on to the 110 really fast, go to the 605, no, 105 to the 605 to the 91. Got it. Okay.
Uh-huh. I know very little. I know that. So I did my master's at a summer program in LA, at Cal State LA.
Oh,
So
cool.
my last 2 summers I lived on campus, which was actually great, like as far as the classes and whatnot. And I just was busy and didn't venture far from campus, maybe like Pasadena a little bit. But the first summer, my brother was living like a block from Hollywood Boulevard
Mm.
in I think in like Little Armenia,
I know
and
exactly where that is.
so I
That's
was
awesome.
living in his apartment and then driving to Cal State LA, which was sometimes okay and sometimes horrendous. But so that's kind of the extent of my LA
No,
driving is
for
that.
the listeners, I am like when you said Hollywood Boulevard and Little Armenia, and then when you said sometimes it was okay, and then I just start shaking my head no, because woof, especially on
Well,
Hollywood Boulevard, it's just
yeah.
rough
So
for traffic.
the driving was not bad because I think I was just on the 101
Yeah.
for most of that stretch, and so that wasn't always so bad, but it was parking around my brother's apartment
Yes.
that I would just, I mean, there were days where I'd spend an hour and a half, 2 hours just circling blocks because you'd get, you'd circle, and kind of the circles would get further out. And then you realize you're so far away that it's not worth it to park there, So then you kind of start circling back in, and then there's like street cleaning. And then it was just anyway.
If it makes you feel better, and you can probably tell your brother this. So I used to spend a lot of time in Los Feliz before it got gentrified, which is kind of around that area, like Hollywood Boulevard and whatnot. I understand completely the parking. I remember I would wait for a post office to close and then quickly like park in that lot, but then it would quickly fill up. And then there's, talk about street cleaning, whatever. So once I decided stupidly, I was an undergraduate, I was like, I'm just going to park at the Rite Aid parking lot and spend the night at this person I'm dating's place. And my car got towed. And they only took cash. And I really wanted to audit that place so badly. Pretty sure they were not nice. So I know exactly. Oh my God. I'm like thinking about trying to find parking just to like go to a movie theater, like a tiny Japanese restaurant. Oh my God. It's a nightmare. And I'm like stressing about it. So.
It was really foreign to me because I learned to drive in Las Vegas, and that's where I did. I was living there at the time, and then just doing summers in LA. And in Vegas, at the time, parking was free everywhere. I mean, all the casinos had their parking garages, and they charge for them now, but it used to be free. And so, the way the city, because Vegas built up quickly, but only recently. And so it expanded with big, wide roads and lots of parking everywhere. Yep. Parking garages where they needed to be. And so the opposite of other big cities. So it was just like, I don't think I parallel parked in Las Vegas ever.
That's
and then
amazing.
Was like living right by Hollywood Boulevard and was like, I was panic.
No, easily. No, I have to admit, I think I got better at parallel parking, but I've also gotten parking tickets, and no, I know exactly what you went through. Exactly. Yeah. Oh my God.
Tell me your parents' names.
So my dad's name is Chris, spelled Kris, and my mom's name is Minsuk.
And what do they do, or did they do when you were growing up?
Sure. So my dad actually was an electrical engineer, and he worked at the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power in downtown Los Angeles. For all of you music nerds out there, that building is directly across the street from the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, which is where the LA Phil had their home. And those like infamous like 4 like fountains that were just, you see them in movies and everywhere. So my dad did this, and he's retired now. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, but in her past life, in Korea, and a little bit when she was when she immigrated to this country, she was an artist, and specifically a sculptor. So I actually recently saw photographs of some of my mom's artwork that she couldn't bring with her because, they're just kind of large objects and whatnot. But I always knew that my mom drew really well, and I think she's picking up drawing again, which is good. And I will have to say that one thing I didn't realize was a parallel, but I realize now is that she's a fantastic gardener. And so it's kind of like she's applying, kind of using the medium of succulents, since she has like this amazing succulent garden, and she's like been able to successfully keep it going. And that's kind of her new medium now. So
nice.
That's what my mom does.
And were they musical?
No.
So,
actually, it's a funny story. I know that I think a good reason why I ended up studying the piano and learning the violin for a very hot second, like for 6 months when I was 6 years old, and I said, we're done because I'd have to practice, is that, yes, I am of Korean descent, and there's this cultural thing where you learn to play the piano or violin or both. So I think that's part of the reason why I started. I also was super drawn to the piano. But also my mom claimed that she was absolutely tone deaf. And I'm like, no, come on, you can like at least match pitch. She's like, nope, I was terrible. And turns out my mom had a whole bunch of artist friends, and they had like a psychedelic Korean band that they like had some recordings. Like,
Nice.
I need to find the tape. I hope I didn't lose it because it sounds like far out Korean music. Like, definitely
Nice.
70s. Definitely some substances were either smoked or inhaled.
Yeah.
Probably smoked because it's Korea. And my mom tells of a story where they were like, dude, just come on, Minsa, get on stage. And she's like, no, no. And they're like, dude, you can sing. And so my mom went up on stage, and then she said the whole band just like stopped and stared at her. I'm like, oh no. And she's like,
Mm.
yeah, that was not great. So I think
Hmm.
she never ever wanted her children to experience that.
Yeah.
And so we started lessons.
Uh-huh. Did you have you said you were drawn to the piano. Was there a piano in the house?
Not at first. I remember growing up in church and like they'd have like a
Mm.
pianist there, and I just like watched the pianist like play songs, and I was fascinated about how like the movements of like the fingers kind of correlated with the sounds.
Yeah.
And I also remember finding a piano at someone's party, and I was like, I'm gonna play this song right now. And I remember I played middle C and G because that's where like the hinges are, and I was just pressing the notes. And I'm like, this does not sound like the song. Like, I announced it to everybody. I'm like, I'm gonna play this song.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, ding, ding. And I was like, how is this not working? It was very confusing to me.
Yeah.
So eventually I think some friends talked to my parents, and they're like Jennifer seems really fascinated with the piano. And like, I would like stare at people at their
Yeah.
fingers and just like, I don't know. I think I was like, can you imagine a 5-year-old just like staring at your right hand?
I mean, yeah, kids are weird.
Yeah.
Kids are weird. So
So that's what I
that
did. So eventually they got a piano, and I started piano lessons when I was 6.
nice.
Yeah.
What so obviously you heard music in church, and that was part of an inspiration, at least, to get into the piano. What other kinds of music? Was there other music at home? Did your parents listen to music?
Um yeah, so my dad actually had a small collection of classical music, but it was the Wendy Carlos slash Emerson Lake and Palmer kind, which is kind of
Yeah.
cool. My first exposure to Bach was through Wendy Carlos's Switched on Bach album.
Okay.
Um, and I remember when I heard acoustic Bach for the first time, and I thought it sounded familiar. And I believe I was listening to Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring, and I was like, "Dad, what's this?" And he's like, "It's Bach." I'm like, "Really?" And he's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "It doesn't sound like Bach." And my dad's like, "Well, it is. It's just they're playing it with traditional instruments and not with the
Mm.
synthesizer." And I think I said, that's dumb, because I really like the
Yeah.
colors that were associated with the Moog synthesizer. Um, my dad also had like a lot of recordings of Aaron Copland's music, of like Rodeo and Appalachian Spring, which I really loved. And I think there's this one pianist, and I forgot his name, but had some very showy like Liszt and Chopin stuff, listening to stuff. So there was that. And I would also say that one one album that really got me fascinated about music was I think Big Bird Discovers the Orchestra. So if anybody can find a recording on YouTube somewhere where Big Bird plays a detective because the orchestra went missing and has to go find the instruments, it'd be much appreciative. But I thought that
I
was
mean,
really cool.
I'll look for that because I'm a big Muppets fan, and we're on a big Sesame Street kick in the house right
Oh my
now.
gosh. I
So
remember as a kid, I thought this line was funny. So Big Bird started off saying, there was an interesting case. It was in the olden days, a couple of weeks ago. And I was like, that's not the olden days. Um, and my dad's like, that was a joke. And I'm like, huh. But that was probably the age where I think I just discovered the Big Bird identified as a male. So I don't know.
uh-huh.
I love it. Like, the clarinet does some arpeggiations,
Okay.
I remember hearing the Dvorak Nine Symphony because they did an excerpt of the oboe, and I'm like, I remember falling in love with the oboe. I'm like, I love the oboe; it's so great. So yes, I think you'd love it, and the Muppets are awesome,
I mean,
100%.
for sure. Uh, so okay, so you started playing piano. Uh, were you good quickly? Was it something that came easily to you? Did you have to work really hard?
No, it came to me pretty easily. It was a really good sight reader. Much to like the chagrin of my mom, I was really good at like not practicing because I'd figure out patterns really quickly, and so um, yeah, this is why I feel like I was kind of like a lazy pianist. Like, and I have to give myself credit. I didn't exactly know how to practice. I think when we first start out, like, we're like, okay, scales, what's the point of them? Or arpeggios, what's the point of them? Um, but I had a knack for it. And eventually, I remember my dad had a friend who is a composer also. Um, at church or something like that, and was telling me about like how maybe one of these days I can like listen to things on the radio and be able to play it back, but I need to
Mm,
practice. So I think he was like recruiting this friend to be like, okay, you need to like sit down and you need
yeah.
to like work at this. It might be like easy for you right now, but you have a talent and it'd be great if you can like develop your skills. And so I think this friend of my dad and my mom were like, all right, you can do some really cool stuff. And I remember he like changed something on a synthesizer to like sound like a soap opera, and I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And that was really cool. I didn't think I would be a composer per se. I was
Yeah.
just like, whoa, I don't know if I could like make up music, but I can just play around with the special effects sounds on the synth.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it was something I think I had a knack for. Probably not so much discipline, but I did like the instrument and I liked playing music.
You know, I was also like it came pretty easily to me, and so
Hmm.
I did almost never practiced. And my piano teacher, Mrs. Bates, was this lovely, sweet little old lady who would like give me
Hmm.
little stickers when I finished songs, and
Yep. Uh huh.
and she always thought that I was practicing, right? Because I could play like whatever she'd give me for the
Oh
week.
yeah.
I could come back and play, but I wouldn't play. And I did not have someone to like get my ass in gear. And it never, so I never actually got very skilled at the piano. Like it
Oh.
just kind of faded, and I'm serviceable. Like I can, I mean, I could never accompany anybody in a performance, but I can like fudge my way through music, right? But because I never had anybody going like, you actually need to practice. They all just kind of were like, yeah, you're pretty good, and I thought, oh, all right, well,
Oh my
great,
God. Like, well, my mom was mean. I mean, she's coming from a good place. So let me tell you a
yeah,
story. I remember once my mom got so fed up that I was not practicing. She said, if you do not practice enough, you will need to pay for your own piano lesson. So I had like I think I did some chores and I had some like dollar bills. And so that was the deal. And I remember like kind of rolling my eyes, probably going like, I know this, it's fine. My mom was like, nope, you are paying Mrs. Schindel, also another old lady, really sweet, also played organ. All right, come time for my lesson. It was an awesome lesson. We were having a great time. I was nailing everything and, got to play the duets. It was awesome. And then my mom gives me this look and it was like, all right, now pay her. And I wanted to be like, oh my God, like, why are you doing this to me,
yeah,
mom? But no, so I like stuck out my hand and paid the lesson. And Mrs. Schindel was like, what is this? I said, my mom says I didn't practice, so I have to pay for my piano lesson. It was so mortifying. And then my piano teacher was like, what? And it was just bad. It was like she
mm,
just like took the money and then just like left because she's super disappointed. But I was like, Mom, that was like one of the best lessons I've ever had. Why'd you have to
mm.
ruin it? So
But evidently it's stuck with you. So
yeah,
for better or
I can
worse,
play.
yeah.
you
Uh,
know?
and so then you get into high school. Were you still playing piano? Did you play other instruments? Did you sing? What was the musical activity like then?
Yeah, so in middle school, I also did band. I ended up picking the flute because I didn't understand what transposing instruments were. I started with the horn, didn't realize that it sounds a perfect fifth below. So I'm like squishing my sad 6 year old or sixth grade embouchure. And
Yeah.
I didn't understand. It didn't make sense. I was like, piano doesn't transpose. Piano, you don't have to tune either. So I did the flute. I also, yeah, I was able to think the band slash choir director was like, we can have you sing in choir, and if you don't mind, do you want to play the piano for us? So I did. I was sang in the choir and played the piano
Which is
as a
like great,
teenager.
but also awful. Like
Yeah, in
it is
hindsight, yeah.
it is in some ways that's a wonderful thing to do because it like spotlights a student and you're saying you're really good at this and what, but it also like takes away from kids just being able to sing, and like be special for that also.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't know. You may have had a really, really wonderful experience with it, but I always, that makes
No,
me,
I get it. If this makes you feel any better, I still had opportunities to sing.
yeah,
Actually, I'd say it was
good.
probably about half and half. Or I think probably once I really wanted the piano solo for Mariah Carey's Hero arrangement for Trouble Voices.
Nice. Yeah.
Like that was fun. Um I did, I see where you're coming from. Cuz I did it at my church too. Like I noticed that they had a pianist who just didn't show up because it was basically a volunteer position, and so I was just able to hop on. It really strengthened my musicianship skills,
Yeah.
but there were times in my childhood where I was like, I just want to be with my friends.
Yeah.
I will say for the record, I did not feel that in my middle school experience, surprisingly, because I did sing, and I did in high school do 1 year of jazz choir.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I did.
Well,
So,
why do you own it? Why do you say it like that? Like, that's great.
cause like, yeah, I should own it. I should be like, yeah, I listened to a lot of jazz standards and I did it for 1 year. I have to admit, when I transferred high school, my mom was like, I still want you to sing in choir. So I went to a new school at the performing arts high school, and Los Al High had a show choir, and it was at zero period. My mom's like, I still want you to sing. And I'm like, okay. So I tried it, and show choir is not the same as jazz choir. And I may have cried after that first day of school and dropped out.
I, there are assuredly videos of me somewhere in the world in sequins dancing
That's
in a show
awesome.
choir. But
That's
uh,
awesome.
I went, my high school, our show choir was not like the hardcore, like competitive, serious, crazy kind of show choir. And I say that with all love and respect to anybody
We
who
love
might be
you
listening
all.
who
Yep.
loves show choir. I got into an argument with somebody in Ohio, actually, who is now a very good friend. But we were out for drinks uh, uh, in Columbus.
Hmm.
We were at the like summer conference, right? The
Right.
OCDA
Hmm.
summer
Hmm.
conference, I think it must have been. And we got into an argument about show, and I won't bring up what the sides were or anything, but like we were at Bar Louie on a patio, like shouting at each other.
That's amazing.
And it was the first time I'd met him.
Oh no.
Was yeah. Anyway, we are good friends now, and have yeah. Anyway.
Well, I mean, again, for me at the time, going from everybody had their own microphone, listening to blend, listening to vowels, and then having to choreography. Also, like the way they were teaching the music was, I didn't want to say I was bored, but yeah, I was a sight reader,
Sure.
and I took pride in just like knowing the lines. And so like, the choir teacher was like playing out the lines as you do, and I'm
Yeah.
just like bored. It's zero period. I know no one. They're like, it was just, first day of school, new school district, no one type of vibe. So
Yeah.
anyways, I ended up dropping choir that
Sure.
day, and didn't really pick up singing until college. So
When along the way did you decide you were going to major in music or become a composer? What was the like? When did that happen?
I think it was a process because I didn't like I knew about majoring in music, but I remember as a high schooler I didn't exactly understand that concept. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because um when you're trained as a pianist, you're not necessarily trained as a collaborative pianist. Even though I literally was one since like
Yeah.
maybe I was 10 or 11, right? And I used to be really good at it. Had I known that that was a way to go, I mean, maybe I would have stuck with piano. I was toying with the idea of other majors, but I wasn't really sure what they would be. But I did really like music, and I I really wanted to go all the way with it. Like I wanted to get my doctorate because I was like, I want to do all the school because I will know everything and I'll make all the money, which is hilarious because
Hilarious.
hilarious.
Yeah.
But I was young and ambitious back then. So for a while I thought I would be getting my doctorate in piano performance. At the high school I went to, quote unquote specialized in piano. Still didn't like to practice, but I practiced more because I figured I got into the school. Took side classes in music theory and piano pedagogy and piano lit. So I've
Wow.
actually, yeah, I've known those things. I was like, oh, I can start my own business, you know. But I was actually asked to take a composition class, and I thought it would always be cool to write music for films. I never thought I
Mm.
had original ideas. The idea of a composer or living composer was a strange concept. As a pianist, there's just so much good lit that we have that we would never be able to play it in our lifetimes, to give an
Yeah.
analogy. So I actually thought all the music was written, and I had no concept of what new music was. And it wasn't until the orchestra teacher, he also taught orchestral literature, introduced me to some really awesome shit. Like I had no idea. There was just some like new music being written. He actually, I can't believe this. We went to LA Phil concerts. He had Stephen Stuckey come by our high school and talk to us.
Wow.
And once we went to a rehearsal at the LA Phil with Esa-Pekka Salonen conducting, and there's a picture on my Facebook someplace. It's like baby Jen Jolley with her friends and Esa-Pekka Salonen and John Adams. They were doing a rehearsal of
Wow.
Naive and Sentimental Music. So I just thought that was really cool. And I was like, oh, I didn't know I can write music. And if I have a storyline to follow, then I can definitely write music to that. I just can't abstractly come up with music myself. And so I thought I would like to write music for films. And I knew that USC had a program that was called Film Scoring Emphasis. It's now Screen Scoring. But I would say probably my sophomore, junior year of high school, I was like, I think I can be a composer and I wouldn't have to practice piano, but I can
Yeah.
noodle because I've been noodling my whole life on the piano.
Yeah.
I always added notes to things. Like in hindsight, I'm like, dude, that was composing. I just,
Yeah.
again, had no idea. I would noodle, I would add tertian harmonies to everything because I was listening to jazz. I would add different rhythms because I would get, I don't want to say I get bored, but I was a teenager. Okay. So like, I just added and arranged things, and I loved arranging things, and that's like the gateway drug right there to
Yeah.
composing. So that's kind of where I was like, I think, I remember telling myself if I get into USC and the film scoring program, then I'm totally gonna do it. If I don't, then maybe I'll be piano performance. So
Yeah.
I got in. I don't know how that happened because there's no way I'd get into USC's program now. It's so competitive,
Yeah.
but I got in, and I just really liked composing music.
That's super cool. You said two things in the last few minutes that I thought I think are so important. One was about not being trained in collaborative piano as a piano player, and I think about how many young piano players there are who learn how to play really well, but who have never accompanied anybody, or
Yep.
if they have, it is not collaborative. You know,
No,
that
it's
they're
true. Yeah.
accompanying something, but not in a way that is where there's any give and take, or where there's a lot of ownership felt by that young pianist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I just think about, I've seen a lot of students come into the university level as piano majors who then have to play for other people and are just lost. And
Awkward.
I've
So
worked as
awkward.
a conductor, right? I've worked with
Mm-hmm.
piano players who are very adept at the instrument, but
Mm-hmm.
who I have no desire to have them anywhere near my
Mm-hmm.
ensemble, because they just they don't have that skill set. Um,
It's true,
and
and I think there's just such a mentality where it's like even at the undergrad level, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because again, I'm not a pianist, I'm not a professor, a piano professor, but you may have one or two classes. Admittedly, in my high school, I think my piano teacher at the time, Dr. Stephen Cook, with us was like, "You're going to accompany this violist." And he actually pulled the violist aside and said, "Okay, I want you to mess up here and I want you to mess up here." So we actually talked about accompanying that. I think we also learned a little excerpt from the Magic Flute. So we'd have to sing along and do that. But other than that one experience, I can't think of any time formally in my piano education of how to be a collaborative pianist.
yeah,
They train you to be a solo pianist.
I mean, I think universities are doing more and more of it, but some of it is just out of need, right? It's because there aren't enough piano players on every campus, and so it has to happen. But I mean, I'm thinking even before that, as kids are growing up, learning to play piano in middle school, early high school, that there has to be some kind of opportunity to present that, right? That just conceptually, even
Oh,
that's a thing to do.
exactly. No, I 100% agree. And, back to our conversation of like, I'd occasionally play for my middle school choir and I'd also like play for my church. If it weren't for those experiences, I don't know if I'd be an adept musician, to be honest. And yeah, like, I think there needs to be that balance. Again, there were a couple times where I was like, oh, I wish I could like be with my friends, because I was so
Yeah.
young. Um, but I really think there needs to be more like chamber playing that, now that I think about it, it's probably having to do with who writes for younger players. Like there are piano books of like young piano pieces for young children and young pieces for different instrument types, but maybe not together. And if a pianist is playing in a duet, it's usually with their teacher to help accompany them.
Yeah.
It's just not the same. um yeah, I think there needs to be more opportunities for that.
Yeah, the other thing that you mentioned that I think is so important, and I, in my experience, I just don't think happens enough, is that you were taught about composers. You were fortunate enough to meet some composers, but like shown that there are composers who are real people who like have a personality and have like that influences their music, and that's part of what we're doing here, right? But
Right.
I mean, I think all through up until I got to the university level, and even then at the beginning of undergrad, I think the only two people that I knew were composers who were living
Hmm.
were Moses Hogan and
Hmm.
Eric Whitacre.
Right.
And I only knew Moses Hogan because we sang one of his pieces at an ACDA conference that I was singing in, and he was in the audience. This would have
That's
been
awesome.
1998.
Oh
So
man,
I
that's so
knew that.
cool.
And my high school choir director was good friends in college with Eric Whitacre.
Hmm.
And so I knew him only because she knew him, but I still never really knew anything about him or who he
Hmm.
was. Like I knew
Hmm.
he was a person that existed.
Hmm.
Um, but I've been in, uh, I'll say this, and I don't want to offend anybody who is a hardworking music educator, but I've been in classrooms where I'll say, who wrote this piece, to the ensemble, and they have no idea.
Hmm.
And that just seems like such a crucial piece of the puzzle, uh,
Hmm.
you know. And so not just for students being able to learn that they could be composers, but just like understanding music in general. Like I think we can should be doing more to make the composers seem like real people, because they are in fact
Yeah, I
real,
mean, last
real
time I
people.
checked, I'm a real person
Yeah.
with wants and needs for things like beverages and
Mm-hmm,
sleep at night.
mm-hmm.
You know what? I actually don't fault these music educators because I don't think we were taught, like, there's such an abstraction between a living, breathing composer and the composer's work. Like, this is probably a 19th century thing of like putting the composer up on a pedestal, saying that they're geniuses. I say, stop that. Stop it. We are real people and you can get to know us. And I think it's easier to get to know us within range. Sorry, like, I'm a child of the 80s, so stranger danger. Just like be nice and introduce yourself
Yeah.
first. But yeah, no, I remember as a kid, like, we'd see a composer's name and we'd be like, okay, the person wrote it, but that in itself is an abstraction. What does that mean to write music?
Yeah.
Unless you've like actually seen it happen, and we normally don't see composers write music in real time, although I guess Twitch is a thing now. But I agree with you. I think that we just need to realize that we are normal people, and even this concept of genius is a fallacy because we creatives like thrive on having conversations with people and working together as an ensemble. I think that's why I love being a composer, is because I like creating music with other people and having
Yeah.
discussions about that. So, in a way, like, our culture had generated, there was this tradition of like, you know, unless you really know who the big name pedestal composer is, like, you won't know who they are. And they'll just have like a first initial and a last name. And it's like, okay. And,
Yeah.
there's just such an abstraction from that. And that kind of makes me sad. So,
Yeah.
and now we can like talk to your students and zoom in. It's kind of great.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're going to fast forward a little bit because I want to talk actually about your music.
Yay.
Um, and we're going to talk, I think, we're going to talk about, I think, three of your choral works. And I am fortunate because I've been able to teach two of them. And so I'm really excited to talk about this. Let's start with Prisoner of Conscience, which is I was listening to it today and I just love it
Oh my God.
so
Thank you.
much. I love
Thank
it
you.
so much. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about the piece?
Yes. Prisoner of Conscience is a multi movement, I would say, song cycle or oratorial. I'll have you all decide what you call it. It's about the arrest and trial of the punk band Pussy Riot, which is why we had our Russian Imperial Stout earlier
That's
on
right.
this
That's right.
podcast. At the time, my friends Quince Ensemble were asking me if I could write them a piece, and this was in 2015. Pussy Riot first made the news when they staged their protests in 2012, so we were a little past that point. It was kind of in our faint memory. And so Liz Pierce was like, Jen, can you write us a piece? Maybe make it, 7 to 9 minutes long, nothing too long. We only have so much money. And I'm like, that's fine. You guys are amazing. I'm so glad that my friend John Sokol introduced me to you all in Bowling Green. So we're cool. I messaged my librettist, Kendall A., and I said, hey, Quince wants to do a piece. And she's like, Pussy Riot song cycle. I'm like, what? That is like weapons grades awesome. Like, let me talk to Liz Pierce about this. I said, Liz, Pussy Riot song cycle. And she's like, that's amazing. And I thought that worked out perfectly because, in having a conversation with them, I know what they're able to do. They have amazing voices, amazing instruments. They're willing to do whatever. One thing that I found interesting about some requests were They do like singing words. They're not opposed to using the voice as an instrument, but they're singers and they like to tell
Yeah.
stories. And that's kind of how they got into it. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. And I respect that. And that they're like, we're also singers. We like singing in other languages. And my first thought was like, okay, that's great. Although I only speak English, I'm probably going to set English. But I thought this Pussy Riot song cycle was kind of perfect
Yeah.
because for those who will take the time to listen, there's actually a bit where they do speak in Russian, and we had to figure out who had the best Russian diction coaches
Yeah.
when they were doing that. So it's an 8 movements with text from the actual statements of the trial in between. So I never thought I would write a super long piece, but let's just say it is longer than 7 to 9 minutes.
Yes. Yes.
But
Uh, okay. I love the piece. I love everything about the piece. I love that it feels, I mean, it is a song cycle of sorts, so there are lots of different feels within the piece.
good
I
point,
almost
yes.
don't even know where to begin, but well, I kind of do know where to begin. The piece has the word fuck in it so many times.
I know.
And that in and of itself is reason enough for me to want to program it over and over and over again. We've talked about it on this podcast several times, why there is not more aggressive language in choral music. I think it is sorely missing, and it is perfect.
Can I just say, I will say, as I don't really sing anymore, but I still sing my own stuff. I think that fuck is actually a very satisfactory word to sing because you have that really sharp fricative and that plosive at the
Uh-huh.
end. And the vowel is actually not a weird vowel. Like, it just seems so satisfying. But
I mean,
you tell me.
oh no, it's a great word. It's a great word. But I anybody who's listened to the previous episodes of this knows that I think sometimes choir music just insists on being like pretty or whatever that means, and it can get a little boring and monotonous in the texts that it chooses and the way that it approaches them, even if they're great texts. It can be the most beautiful poetry, but when you set it 100 different times, it loses. No matter how good the setting is, it loses something. And I think sometimes that there's this idea that certain poems will like stand the test of time, and that's why we use them. And I love that this piece, even though I do think it has legs, right, that it applies to things that aren't just Pussy Riot, or aren't just this small piece of time, and can relate to other situations. It is about a very specific moment in time, right?
Yes.
And I think that that's awesome, that it addresses this kind of singular idea.
Yes. I will also say that because I was writing this in 2015, I just didn't know if it would have legs because I was like, oh, people have already forgotten about Pussy Riot. But I realized one timeless thing about it is you're talking about freedom of speech, which I hate to say is always going to be relevant.
Yeah.
Which surprised me in many forms. Who knew that I would be worried about freedom of speech? I'm thinking about actually like Taiwan and China right now, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is just really scary stuff, and that our fellow humans are going through this. And so I just wanted to add that just because I didn't think this piece would still be talked about. I mean, I'm very proud of it. Like as a composer, I feel like I was flexing my muscles. I'm like, I am a good composer. I can write good music for choral voices. But I just didn't know like if anybody would still be listening. But I'm very thankful that Brad, you still listen and that it is still relevant today.
It is. It's super cool. Let me ask you. Where did the reggae vibe come from?
So there is, I'm trying to remember the name. So when I was working with my librettist, um, the good news is that my librettist studied music, not
Hmm.
formally in college, but took piano lessons and could read music. And actually, one of her sisters actually went into vocal performance. So I can have a dialogue with them. And I said, okay, great. Pussy Riot song cycle. How many movements are you thinking of? Because clearly, this writer friend of mine had an idea already, and she's like 8. I'm like, okay, I wasn't thinking of an even number. I said, I tell you what, here's what I was thinking text wise. It is definitely a punk piece. I want to alternate these punk pieces with church like music because Pussy
Hmm.
Riot was arrested in a church when they were making their music video. So that's why you have like your up tempo, lot of fucks, not very
Yeah.
melodic, but it has that drive to it as much as you can with an acapella voice, and then some hat tips to motets and whatnot. Plus, I really love motets and they seem really fun to sing.
Yeah.
So back to your reggae question. At the time, there was I think the beginning of the Black Lives Matter movement. I think it was Trayvon Martin. I can't. The one in St. Louis. It was absolutely terrible. So there's a little bit of a Black Lives Movement vibe in there, and my librettist was, I want to write a movement called Police and Thieves.
Mm.
So the Clash has done a track called Police and Thieves, which is actually a cover of a reggae song by Junior Marvin called Police and Thieves. So it's basically like all this violence and the man and like, who's bad or good type of thing. So hence
Yeah.
the reggae. At first, when I got the first draft of the lyrics, I thought it was probably a little bit too close to the Junior Marvin version, but with the Black Lives Movement and also the history of punk music via the Clash and also the reggae Police and Thieves, I thought it was appropriate. Plus, I remember as an undergraduate, I actually went to a performance of William Bolcom's Songs of Innocence and Experience with like this big ass ensemble of like choir and like pop singer and folk singer and orchestra. And I remember he ends that piece, um, the human form divine, as a reggae. Because reggae sound up tempo but are also sad and kind of like, what's the word, they kind of give commentary
Mm.
actually of like what's going on, and so that's why you have a little bit of a reggae vibe. It's very interesting. I'm glad you thought it was reggae. Some people are like, oh, it's doo-wop, and I'm like, no, it's because it's trying to be,
Yeah.
it's a cappella women singing, and Liz does her best to do like the bass line as low as
Yeah.
she can. But yeah, that's kind of like my hat tip to the Clash and Junior Marvin.
Nice. Yeah. When my singers were rehearsing it, we talked a lot about that reggae chop, that like that
Mm-hmm.
it actually kind of hits hard. But it is it's so interesting because it's so different musically from the pieces around it.
That's true.
The vibe is so different, but what you were just saying is reggae, if you're not paying attention, feels happy all the time, right? If you
Correct.
just kind of like you hear it in the distance and you don't really know what's going on, it has a vibe that to most of us, I think, feels happy or joyful or kind of laid back. Um, but there's so much more depth to the music as an art form. But
Yep.
then just within every piece, right? There's um, a lot of subtext, and
Yes.
so I thought that was a cool way to set uh, this broader text, to have that kind of in the middle of it. So
Thanks. And I was also thinking with, again, treble voices, which are stereotypically like heard as angelic. And actually,
mhm.
Quince was like, look, we do sound pretty, but we can do other things. I think they were pretty much saying, like, we'd love to explore what our voices can do
Yeah,
because, yes, we sound angelic and we can sound angelic, but we've been sounding angelic all the time.
yeah.
It gets a little monotonous.
They are awesome. I love them.
Yes, I love them
And we
too.
should say, if people are interested, they can find the score online. Although I know you're revamping your website at the
I am
moment.
revamping my website, so
Uh-huh.
it'll be up. I do have an issue page, so
Hmm.
issuu.com. Please, I'm happy to have you all look at the score. It's totally fine.
And the piece is recorded on Quince's album, which I believe is titled Motherland.
It is.
And so you can find that on Spotify or I'm sure wherever music is sold and streamed.
Exactly.
Uh, I love that piece. I mean, I very legitimately could ask you a million different questions about that piece of music. I think, we were just talking about the fallacy of genius in artistry, but that piece, it's kind of genius, Jen.
Okay,
It's
thank
kind of
you.
genius, and I love
Had
it. I think it's
Thank you.
awesome.
Thank you. I will also say I had a remarkable librettist and a libretto,
Yes,
which
Kendall. I mean,
yes, for real,
it's the text is amazing.
stellar. So it was definitely a team effort, and I say this just because I'm probably saying this because I've had to tell my students this many times. You have to spend a lot of time finding a good text. You
Mm-hmm.
don't say like, I want to write a choral piece and you just dive into it. Like you need to read and speak the text and just really understand it and hear how it sounds before you dive in.
Yeah,
So mega props and kudos to Kendall because it's hers too.
100%, 100%. Let's talk a little bit about Drei Brücken, or
Yes.
Three Bridges. Yeah, and
Uh-huh.
that is. I also love that piece, although that took me a little bit longer to fall in love with than Prisoner. Prisoner, I was like, got it,
You got it.
awesome. The Drei Brücken was not immediately my favorite piece,
That's fair.
although I do love it. Tell us a little bit about the genesis of that piece and what it's all about.
Yeah, so I was kind of randomly commissioned by the Contemporary Arts Center in Cincinnati to come up with a piece slash performance for one of their galas. It was like for a fundraiser. I didn't quite understand what that meant. I mean, I know what a gala is, and I know what a fundraiser is, but normally as a composer, if somebody asks me to write a piece, it's like I write a piece for a specific ensemble. So it was interesting because the year before they had some kind of like band with dancing, and I'm not that. Like I'm not, I don't like whip up tunes for dance, although that would be fun, I'm sure, later on in my life. But so I wasn't quite sure what exactly to do. But I didn't want to say no. I thought this was a great opportunity. I love the CAC. It's the Contemporary Arts Center in downtown Cincinnati. I love the building. It sounded like a lot of fun, but I didn't know if there were like what do you write for a gala really, right? Like I
Yeah,
don't know.
sure.
Something. There was a part of me that because I did go to USC, I was like, do I look to Morton Lauritsen because people really like his music, and this is
Sure.
for a fundraiser, and D. Ray Tone got him like a little zippy car with a license plate. I don't know. Like I just no, but
Yeah.
seriously, he had a
No.
sports car with DAR8TON. It's
Uh-huh.
nuts. But
Uh-huh.
anyway, so I just didn't know what exactly I'd be writing. And was working with Kendall. This is actually before our Prisoner of Conscious
Mm-hmm.
piece. And we were brainstorming and we're like, okay, let's make it about Cincinnati. And Kendall was like, you know what? The Brent Spence Bridge has been a hot topic in Cincinnati. It is a terrible bridge. Like, whenever you drive it, it's like when you're coming from the airport in northern Kentucky and there's like no shoulders. You just hope the bridge doesn't break down. It's two layers. And what's fascinating about this bridge, and actually the other bridges in Cincinnati, is that it goes across the Ohio River. So, for those of us who are aware of United States history, Ohio was part of the Union, Kentucky was part of the Confederate States, and so the Ohio River is very significant. And so you have these bridges that now cross into Ohio. And so she was like, why don't we tell the story of Cincinnati through three bridges, or drei Brücken? The reason why it's in German is because Germans settled in Cincinnati, and there's actually a neighborhood in Cincinnati called Over the Rhine because they saw the Ohio River and it reminded them of the Rhine. So that's why it's in German. Also, I probably wanted to make it difficult for myself to not pronounce it very well. So this choral piece is in 3 movements, and I pitched it to Drew, who's coordinating this performance. And he's like, I think I like this idea. And I said, great. I'd really like to get a choir. Like, how's this going to work? He's like, we will pay your musicians. And I'm like, awesome. So I got to work. I also knew that they would not have much time to rehearse or put this together, which is usually how it is in new music. And so that's why I ended up adding some type of accompaniment because there wasn't going to be a piano in the space. I knew there was going to be a synthesizer. And so therefore that's why I decided to lean into that.
Yeah.
So it's in 3 movements. First movement is accompanied SATB. Second movement is a split choir to represent the duality of the Brent Spence Bridge. There's a upper level and a lower level, and so that's the piece has like the 2 choirs broken up. And the third one is kind of looking to the future of kind of like bridging the gap and kind of pushing freedom forward again with the history of the Ohio River and thinking that slaves literally crossed the Ohio River before there were these bridges, and kind of looking forward to a new bridge that Cincinnati will hopefully build in the future because they really need to replace that bridge. It is scary. So that's the genesis of the piece, and it was performed at this gala. I think I have very crappy video of it, maybe on my YouTube channel from a long time ago. I think I had a camera. It wasn't recorded, and it was while people were eating dinner. Like I said, it was a different experience than what the gala attendees have experienced, but I think they wanted something more introspective, and so that's how this piece came to be.
Yeah. Well, we did this my first year at the University of Toledo, and we added to the crappy video because we have I think a flip camera kind of side, and it's just it's a total whitewash on the choir, and you can barely see anybody's faces. But so there are a couple of crappy videos of the piece.
It's better. At least people weren't like eating, and like I'm not even blaming the attendees. Like we were at dinner.
Yeah.
Like I probably stopped eating because I had to say something before my piece. If not, I would totally be eating through my own piece more or less because I was hungry.
Well, totally understood. This podcast is officially presented by my group, Whatever and Ever Amen, and we primarily sing at bars and restaurants and places like that. So we never have music that is not accompanied by the clink of glasses or whatever else. So that's totally good. The third movement is gorgeous, and it is made more beautiful because there is so much kind of strife and angst in the music preceding it.
Yes.
And so as a listener, if you're watching the video, the crappy videos, or if you're sitting in the audience of a performance of this, there is just so much kind of feeling of tension in the pieces, in the movements preceding the end. And there's, I think it's in the second movement, I think one of the choirs, I think, is singing in a high tessitura, singing, "We don't need your sympathy, we don't need your empathy," I think is the text. And it feels very intense, and then to end in this third movement that is so kind of peaceful, and it as a singer feels so good when you get to that ending, and you just get to sing these kind of long, kind of warm lines.
I honestly think I felt the same way while writing it, because I was like, we need to release some shit here. Like,
right.
we need to end on a happy, like, positive, warm note. I think when I was working with Kendall, she's like, "How do you want it to sound?" And I think I said, "I want it to sound like Christmas." And I know that sounds cheesy.
Yeah.
So if you all want to listen to the third movement and be like, does it seem like that warm hug when it's like snowing outside?
Yeah.
You let me know. But that's
Yeah.
kind of what I had in mind compared to the scared for my life driving on the Brent Spence Bridge, dealing with traffic and dealing with that really aggressive text like, we don't need your sympathy, and these crunchy chords, and it was high in the tessitura. My bad. Sorry.
No, but that's great. I mean, that highlights the emotional content of it. I mean, I think that it shouldn't be any other way. It is interesting though, because if somebody said, you're going to sing a 3-movement piece about bridges, I'm not sure that angst and strife and that's what I would picture, right?
You're like, that's cute. It's how quaint. It's bridges. We use them and we paint them. Yay.
Yeah, but it is rather intense. I did want to I want to point out, and you may or may not be able to speak to this, but I think it is in Brent Spence 1, the layout of the poetry on the page is super cool and really important, because and I don't know if I talked to you about this, and if I didn't, then maybe I'm just making it up, and I could be lying, but I think it is looks like it is shaped like a suspension bridge on the page.
You got it. It is.
And it's it's super cool. And I am sure I looked at this years ago when we sang it, but I was just looking at it again today and just trying to make sense of like what the poetry means. And you really do have to, I think, see it on the page, in addition to, singing it as it's composed. But that visual is just really cool. I got a whole new appreciation for that section of the piece today.
Well, that's awesome. I'm glad you caught it, because I knew that's what Kendall was doing. And there was a part of me that felt bad that I was like, when I put it in music, I'm destroying that image. But, I put it there in the front matter of the score. If I remember correctly, again, it's been quite a few years since I've written that. Oh, it's 9 years old. All right. So almost 10 years old. Woo. The first movement is the Roebling Bridge, which is actually built before the famous Brooklyn Bridge. They were built and designed by the same person. So that's why it does look like a suspension bridge on its side. So yes, once I get my website actually updated, I would encourage you all to check that out. And I'm sure Kendall would be absolutely thrilled to know that you caught on to what she did there.
Yeah, super cool. This is a digression in the conversation. I flew into Cincinnati once years ago. I was on my way to Charlotte from Las Vegas. We were going for our fantasy football draft, which we do in person. Actually. We kind of travel all around the country every year.
Okay, that's bad.
I knew that we had a stop in Cincinnati. I did not realize that the airport was in Cincinnati, North Kentucky.
Correct.
And the flight attendant, when we landed, was just the sweetest lady. And we're landing, and I think we'd already been drinking. It's 10 a.m. I don't know. But fantasy football draft weekend.
Exactly.
And we're getting ready to land, and she says, "Welcome to Cincinnati, North Kentucky. You have experienced a time change." and I just thought that was the loveliest way to say that possible. And that has always stuck with me. I don't know why.
That's awesome. And
I've never thought about experiencing a time change. And she was lovely. Anyway, so that's whenever I think of Cincinnati or Kentucky, that's the first thing in my brain.
That's great.
I wanted to ask you about this newer piece, and I'm gonna maybe have to look up the title. Oh my goodness,
Her
it's right.
speed left the winds behind.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with the text, so I've had to learn my own title.
Yeah, it's open on my computer because I was listening to it right before we talked. But in all honesty, to anybody who's listening, I have not finished listening to it. I'm about 2/3 of the way.
Bad.
No, not at all. But I'm about 2/3 of the way through, and I've been watching the video. The video is a trip.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome. I feel like I should have maybe had a couple more drinks before watching it. It's like, I mean, it's kind of trippy.
Oh, it is. And I think I can explain to both you and the audience what it's about. So
yeah,
it's actually about being in space. So I wrote a piece that's part of a larger piece. There is this my friend Lindsay Kesselman, who's a soprano, and she does a whole bunch of new music things. She is in a trio called Trio Trium Fatrix. And the other singer, so she's a soprano. Hai Ting Chin is mezzo soprano, and I am blanking on the contralto, which is unfortunate because she's amazing. Anyway, this trio was hired by Voices of Ascension in New York City, and they wanted to commission new works for choir and vocal works, and so they had this trio work on a project. Hai Ting Chin got the idea of writing a piece about astronauts. And she was listening to some astronaut interviews, and she noticed that what they all had in common was what's called the overview effect, which is when an astronaut goes into space, or if we were to ever go into space and we're floating around, there's a sense of awe and wonder when you see our planet for the very first time. And she noticed that is something that all astronauts had in common. You realize how grand and simultaneously fragile our planet is, and you watch in amazement. So Hai Ting thought it'd be really cool to assemble a bunch of quotes from astronauts about their experiences in space, and she narrowed it down to women astronauts, and then thought it'd be cool to come up with a collective piece where multiple composers write a movement in this collective work. And now I'm also blanking on the name of the whole piece. I think we're getting late into the evening here. My bad. Think.
Is it Astronautica?
Yes, thank you. Astronautica. So that's the title of the whole piece. And so she decided to ask women composers to write a movement. And so Lindsay put my name forward. And what Hai Ting did at this point was she got to know every single one of the composers who wrote for this project. And I guess she stalked me on the internet, probably listened to Prisoner of Conscience, I'm hoping, because I'm really proud of that one, and some other pieces of mine, and came up with some quotes from interviews from astronauts that probably would appeal to my music or whatnot. So I ended up settling on a text that was extracted from an interview by former astronaut or retired astronaut Heidi-Marie Stephenson-Piper, who talks about seeing planet Earth on the first time. She was, I think, probably working on the International Space Station. And what drew me to her text was, going back to this concept about we didn't know there were living composers. I mean, we certainly know there are living astronauts, but we kind of see them as whoa, they're astronauts, right? Yeah. And they're just kind of superhuman in their own way. In this interview, she was talking about seeing Earth for the first time. And she said she realized she's not as good in geography as she thought. And I felt like, man, I probably have nothing in common with this person, but I definitely know I'm not as
Yeah.
good in geography as I think. And she went on to say that it's because when you look at a map, you have borders and lines, and when you're floating in space, you have rivers and mountains, and you try,
Yeah.
when you're seeing shapes and everything disoriented, it's way harder to figure out where you are. So, in reference to the video that Brad saw, this piece was originally supposed to be performed the summer of 2020 at National Sawdust, and
Yeah.
sad face, we all know what
Yeah.
happened. And especially if you're a singer, you are spreading some, you're spreading some things. So
Mm.
that performance had to be canceled. So instead, the singers were like, you know what, like we need to record this, we need to perform this. So fun fact, everything in NASA is public domain. You can use photographs, you can use interviews, you can use video,
Mm.
and as long as you give them credit. So there's an excerpt. So now my piece has video, and actually the whole piece has video, and we hope to perform it. Like we're thinking about trying to get a hold of NASA, but they're really hard to get a hold of, actually.
Sure.
Like ridiculously hard. And so during the part in my piece where it's like I'm not as good in geography as I thought, there are lakes and rivers, and you actually see video of our planet, but they have labels like Kentucky and Cincinnati. Actually, they pass on through that. I thanked Tai Ting for doing that. She's like, oh, no, they have videos that NASA does for you that does this. She's like, because it's really difficult to figure that out. So that's the piece in the video, and that's kind of why I chose it, is that I found something human in this dialogue.
Yeah, it's super cool. I mentioned to you before we started officially recording, it made me laugh, but like in the best way. There's, I'm listening to this piece, and I'm going to pull up the text really quick. So they're talking about, you spend a lot of time at the beginning of the piece. They say, we came out on a night pass. We came out. It's this kind of setup about before they see Earth, right? And so I'm kind of listening to this, and there's some repeated texts, and I'm getting ready to have our conversation tonight, and so I'm kind of doing some other stuff, and then I just hear them go, "Wow!" and it made me laugh, and I felt guilty at first because I thought, I don't know if this is supposed to be funny, if it's okay to laugh at this, but I went back and then was reading the text, and I think it was funny because it was so human, because it felt real, right? It was language that I use, right? And that
Correct.
so often
Yeah.
in choral music, you're singing text that sounds nothing like the way we talk. And I think that's a barrier to the audience sometimes, but this is so easily connected. And so, yeah, they say, wow. And I guess I wasn't as good as geography as I thought. And I was laughing, but not because the words were funny, but just because it felt like a shared experience, right? Like,
That's
that's what
exactly
I would
it.
say. I'd look at the Earth and go, wow,
Yeah, actually, I was reading the original interview, the text from the original interview, because like Haiting went back and forth. The first draft of the libretticized interview, I was like, there was a lot of technical jargon, and I will say, for me personally as a composer, it's really hard for me to set 4 and 5 syllable words. It's really difficult. Like I do it on occasion, and I think it sucks. So
Yeah.
I was wondering if Haiting, who's libretticized things before, and she was a singer herself, like could like give me different versions so that there was less of that technical language. So what I
Yeah.
found fascinating about this text, the original interview, was that Hyde Marie was like, she's an expert, right? She's an astronaut in space. She's talking about, okay, so we got on the EVO thing, blah, 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 like being all technical. And she's like, oh, and I was done with my, I was done with my chores. So I thought like I'd take a moment. And you can tell in the interview, she's like, so I took a moment and was like, wow. And in the interview, she actually said, wow, so many times, explaining the first time she saw Earth from outer space. So I was like, I have to highlight that, and this just to really kind of pause time and pause the flow of the music, just to allow these wows to come across. Like, I almost think that I took some out, or that Hai Ting took some out, because she's like, wow, this is amazing. And to go from somebody who's like, I'm technical, I'm trained to do this, this is my job, I'm just doing my job, and then just to have that moment of humanity of like, wow, and oh, where am I? And I laughed when I read that. Like, and I'm glad you did too, because I wanted you to feel that reaction. Like, I usually have no control over how like people feel about my music, and I'm glad you found it funny too. And that's what really drew me to the text, where I could just be like, yeah, I think I would react in the same way. Because I don't know any of the technical stuff at all.
Well, from the little bit that I've, the short amount of time that I've spent with the piece, I know that I like it already. And I like it for much the same reason that I like the other two pieces we discussed, that it finds a way to be specific to a moment, right? I mean, the singer singing wow, the person saying wow, that's about a very, very specific moment in time.
True.
And it captures a moment, but still, it feels like it is, goes on, right? I mean, it's not just captured in that moment, right? It applies to something bigger than that. But I love that about the pieces that you've done for choirs, that they are about a really specific moment, and that you're not afraid of that, because I feel like so many composers have this idea about writing something that is for posterity's sake, which I don't really understand, the kind of arrogance behind thinking that your piece is going to last for hundreds of years. I mean, I hope everybody who I've talked to on this podcast, I hope your music lasts a really long time. But the moment is so important. And choral music that's what it is, right? It's a moment shared between a performer and an audience. And so I think your music does that really well.
Wow, thank you so much. I will say that I remember when I was an undergrad, I was like, I learned of all these pieces, right, in the core, the repertoire, like what makes a great piece. And I remember like thinking like, well, how do I make my piece great or last? Like, whatever that means, right? That's such an abstraction. And what I realized was, some of our like so-called famous pieces, or ones that stuck around, actually they were not concerned about lasting. They were in the moment and they were speaking their truth. Symphony of Psalms, actually, I think I was reading about Stravinsky's Symphony of Psalms, and he was commissioned by the Boston Symphony to write them a piece. And if I recall correctly, in Alex Ross's The Rest Is Noise, like his wife wasn't doing so well health-wise, and so he went back to Russian Orthodoxy and was trying to find meaning in life. And through that, we have this wonderful piece that I still love, and is still being performed. And I was like, you know what? I should not try to write a piece that will survive. I will try to write my truth and try to do my best writing my truth.
Yeah.
And so thank you so much for those kind words, because that means a lot. Thank you.
Hey, can you write like a lot more choir music? Could you just start cranking that out? Maybe let me rephrase that. To anyone who's listening, tell all of your friends to commission Jen to write more choral music, because we need more of it.
Thank you.
I just think it's great.
It's so funny because like I think people don't know me as a choir conduct or choir
Yeah,
composer. I write whatever. Like a lot of people in the band world are like, "Oh, do you actually write for voice?" And I'm like, "Oh my god, I'm so sad." Like I like writing things I would like to sing myself. So if that's a
yeah,
promotion for my own music, like I wish I could
yeah.
sing my own pieces.
Can I ask you a few kind of like quick hit things that are unrelated to music or anything maybe that we've been talking about?
Go for it.
You mentioned Ted Lasso, which I think everyone should agree was like the best show
The
of
best
2020
show.
and 2020 and amazing and lovely. Are you? I mean, are you a TV person? Have you been binging a lot of things? Did you binge through the pandemic?
Um, I tend to binge through dinner. So, over time, yes, I've seen Ted Lasso. I saw all of Modern Family recently. That took a while.
That's a good one. Yeah,
But I don't think I like binge, but well, what's your definition of binge? Like 3 or 4 episodes in a sitting?
sure.
Then yes. Okay.
Any other things that you've watched lately you've been really excited about?
Um, I really liked WandaVision. Like I
Haven't
went
seen it
through
yet.
really
Yeah.
fast. When you have time, I thought it was done really well with very good research. Yeah, I will say nothing else. I'm sure there are spoilers online. And I didn't think I was like a comic book fan, but props to that series. Um, I liked okay, so it's only on Peacock. So I guess yeah, okay, guilty. I do binge watch. The new show, I'm gonna have to Google this. Sorry, Peacock. New shows. It's about Rutherford Falls.
Okay.
That was well written, really diverse cast and really diverse set of writers. So it's about like small town America, about this guy whose ancestors founded Rutherford Falls, but they're also on Native American land and
Mm.
dealing with that, reality there. So I would say that's a good show. I did like Modern Family. I admit, like even toward the end, it was like, okay, we can wrap it up.
It's, but
So
still good
it
and
is still
charming,
good
right?
and charming. If there are any suggestions of what to watch next, I'm actually looking out for it. But I do know that Ted Lasso does start on July
It's
23rd.
very soon.
So,
Well, so I have two to ask you about. Uh, Mostly because we were talking about space and female astronauts. Um, do you? Well, you must have Apple TV because you watched Ted Lasso, or you had it at some point. Did you watch For All Mankind?
no, but it's on my list because it's an
I
interesting
I
story.
did not think that I was going to like it when I heard. Like I don't know if I saw a preview or talked to somebody who'd seen it, but I did not think I was going to like it. It's really good.
Yeah, for those who don't know, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because you've
Yeah,
actually seen it, I have not. It's like an alternate reality where the Russians landed on the moon first, I think.
it is. That's exactly right. So the Russians
Okay.
land on the moon first, and then there are a lot more um, diverse players in the United States making trips to the moon and so
Yes.
on. So there are
Yes.
females, people of color who are
Hmm.
now involved in the space race, and it is they're getting ready. They must be filming season 3 now.
Cool.
And so there's a lot of time in between season 1 and season 2, and a lot of time between season 2 and season 3. And they do a really good job with this alternate history. The other show that I have only seen 2 episodes of, but I think that I kind of love, is Kevin Can Fuck Himself.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it is. Now I can't remember her last name. Annie from Schitt's Creek.
Yes, I
Uh,
saw her on the promo. So that's
I
on Apple TV?
No, that's on AMC.
Okay. I'll have to
But I've seen 2 episodes, and it's kind of genius.
That's
So
awesome.
anyway,
I remembered one more, sorry. On
yeah,
Apple TV, Mythic Quest, where they make fun of the video game writers.
yeah,
Since I'm supposed to be writing my brother's video game this summer. Like they have an
nice.
alpha version out, so I thought that was That was really good. Mythic
That's on
West.
my list. That's coming up
It
soonish.
might be a tiny bit of a spoiler, but F. Murray Abraham is in it. So I was like
That's
excited.
it. Yeah.
AKA
Uh,
Salieri.
we talked about drinks earlier, and you said you might be drinking a bourbon. What is your normal go-to drink? Are you like cocktails, liquor kind of person, wine, beer? What's your go-to?
So, so this is interesting because normally when we're not in a pandemic, I would actually really like craft cocktails. When I was
Yeah.
living in Cincinnati, there's this mixologist named Molly Wellman. You could follow her on Instagram, and I think she has published a book where she had this bar Japs, and it was just like her own bitters. It was just amazing. I just love the classic cocktails. That being said, I'm lazy and I don't make them at home. Although
Yeah.
props to my friends Transient Canvas who come with their own bar. Like they have a fold away bookshelf and they have a
Nice.
travel bar. So that being said, my drink at home is now scotch. I've just gone
Nice.
hardcore, but I really love it. But I'm not really a peaty scotch drinker.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so scotch is my drink.
Yeah. I like to tell people that I'm discerning but not discriminating.
Yes.
So if it's good and it's done well, I'm kind of into. I switched. I moved to bourbon at some point during our
Yes.
conversation.
All right, what bourbon are you drinking? I'm curious.
I've got some Basil Hayden's somewhere
I
behind me.
love Basil Hayden's, and supposedly it goes really well with Thin Mints.
Uh, okay, yeah,
Somebody paired it, but anyways, no. Basil Hayden's is a great bourbon.
yeah. Last meal? You could pick one meal for your last meal. What's it going to be?
Oh man, oh there's so much good food.
Right.
Oh my god. Um, you know, what is I'm like googling thing. What is that dish? Yes, so traditional Filipino food, lumpia. It's like the egg rolls but better.
Yeah.
I might do that because I won't have to worry about eating too much fried food the next morning, I suppose.
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair
I'll
enough.
go with that for now, but that can change. There's a lot of good food out there.
Yeah. Uh, are you listening to any commercial music, pop music, anything on the radio right now that's got you excited?
Yeah, so I'm actually pulling up what I've been listening to on the Spotify. Admittedly, I have been listening to the Ted Lasso soundtrack. So
Nice.
Mumford and Sons does do that. Plus, they have some really good mixes in there. I've also been probably a month ago. I was on a Prince kick because I was writing a piece, and the kids are like, "You should listen to Prince when you write our piece." And I'm like, the kids are all right. That's right.
Yeah.
And I also
There
miss
you go.
Prince. Like I can't. Oh man, makes me sad. So I would say anything funk, definitely Prince and Mumford and Sons, which are completely different, I think. But
A little
those are
little
my
bit
two.
different.
Little bit.
Yeah. Uh, you know, I was so happy that you agreed to do this with me because um, I just think you're just a nice person. and I
Oh,
and
thank
I
you, Brad.
genuinely I like your music and was so happy so happy you could be here.
Same. I was actually really glad you reached out. I'm glad it finally happened. Because it's been a minute, I think.
Yeah, it sure has. You know, I have said this I think to a couple of different people that I've had on. Some of the people that you're going to be episode 7 of this podcast, so we're still pretty early in the process. And I've mostly reached out to people that I've worked with and know a little bit. Um, uh, sometimes you meet people and you go, okay, we've met. And sometimes you meet people and you go, I think we're friends. Like we've met
Mhm.
once or whatever, but we're friends. And you just kind of know that you like a person. And that was how I felt when we met. That I just thought like, oh yeah, we could be friends. You're such a kind person, and you were gracious working with me and with our students, and have I think after you left, even were like commenting on their social media, nice to them, and it like made their lives. It was awesome.
I loved working with your students, and yes, I can't believe they're like grown up now and taking various music ed jobs. I have been following them on the Instagram. They were wonderful.
It was lovely, and I hope that we have a chance to have real drinks in person sometime soon, and that the world is not completely fucked, and then we,
Yes.
things get back to somewhat normal.
I'm very much looking forward to this, Brad. It'll be awesome.
Thank you so much. I don't know if you have any of your pseudo drink, your drink. Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah, there you go. Cheers. Thanks for being here.
Chin.
All right.
Take care, Brad.
Thank you for joining us for episode 7 of the Composer Happy Hour, presented by Whatever and Ever Amen. Thank you to my guest Jennifer Jolley for joining me today. I hope those of you listening have been as excited about this slate of guests as I have been. If you've heard multiple episodes, you can probably sense a few different themes that are coming through. There is, at some point, a plan to do a bonus episode to talk about that, and to also talk more about Whatever and Ever Amen in general. I promise it is going to happen soon. In the meantime, go and listen to more of Jen's music. She has a ton of wonderful music for non-choral ensembles that I think you'll enjoy. I would be remiss if I didn't remind you to rate and review our podcast on your streaming platform of choice. This will only take you a couple minutes to do, and it will help us out a lot. There are a number of high-quality podcasts out there related to choral music. And I hope you check them out too, but I also want to make sure that people are able to find this podcast. Your ratings and reviews help them do that. My guest next time is David Montoya, and we look forward to sharing a drink with you then. Thanks again, everyone. Cheers.